Let's do it, people. Red, Gold, and Bold podcast coming at you tonight. Proudly brought to you by our friends at GAN Asphalt and Concrete. They are Kansas City's best when it comes to eliminating parking lot problems. Been doing it since 1994. Find them online at ganasphalt.com. Chadiha, Eager, Petro with you, discussing the career of Patrick Mahomes. What is he right now on the pantheon of the all-time greats? Everybody got all mad at me for putting him at the top. You know, it's what always happens. Chadiha and Eager ganging up on poor little old me. What will he be when it's all said and done? What will it take for others to join me putting him at the top of the list? Maybe we'll even get into what kind of numbers he finishes with. It's all coming up right now. Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by GAN Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at ganasphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. GAN Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. GAN Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out ganasphalt.com for more info. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
Thank you, Curtis. As you heard, Best Chiefs podcast, coined by Eric Eager, definitively the Best Chiefs podcast, talking about the best quarterback in football. Everybody is ready to go there. Where does it have to go for him to be the best of all time? Or, I don't know, is everybody ready to go there? Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, Soren Petro with you here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Eric, let's start with you. You seemed excited on the front. Where is Patrick Mahomes right now?
All time?
All time. I mean, do we all acknowledge, and maybe Jeff do we acknowledge he's the best quarterback in football right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's not even a question.
Okay. So we'll start there. He's the best in the game right now. Where does he sit all time, Eric?
I'm happy and willing to go with second.
Really? Okay. I'd like to point out that on our 2D podcast, if people haven't caught that, you can catch it wherever you get your podcast, our 2D NFL podcast. We did our greatest all-time team a week or two ago, and you lost your mind when I put Patrick Mahomes at number one. Your complaint, he's one away. And that is the venom I got because I had him one spot higher than you.
Yeah, magnitude matters, Petro. So what is a quarterback's job? A quarterback's job is to win championships. Okay. So I look at like the best passers of all time statistically, and I'm looking at Brady, Breeze, Manning, Favre, Roethlisberger, Rivers, Matt Ryan, Dan Marino, Aaron Rodgers. You go down to like the John Elways, the Fran Tarkingtons.
What are you using when you rattle those names off?
When I'm just looking at yards, right? Like the guys that have been around the longest, produced the most. When I look at Manning's clearly, in that top five. Montana clearly, I think, in the top. But when I look at projecting Mahomes forward, and we're going to talk about that in a second, I think Mahomes eclipses all of them, championships, MVPs, kind of all of that stuff. I think the only player that he's going to have a hard time eclipsing in any of those totals that matter to me is Brady. And so I'm going with Mahomes second right now.
All right. Jeff, where does he sit for you?
Well, look, I'm not going to project. I'm just going off where he is right now, what he's done. Like, he's certainly in the top 10. That's if everybody's ever played the game, which is impressive in its own right.
Yes,
after 6 years to make that statement about a guy. I can't put him ahead of Peyton Manning right now. I can't put him ahead of Aaron Rodgers right now. I can't put him ahead of Dan Marino, John Elway, because I've watched these guys throughout their entire careers. And so that, to me, becomes the question of Patrick Mahomes. Is not so much how amazing is he and how talented is he and what's he done so far. It's how long can he keep doing this? Because that's ultimately, to me, what puts you into that conversation.
Do you have questions, though, Jeff, about Mahomes' longevity and doing, like, I guess the two like questions are, will he play that long? And B, after Andy Reid retires or whatever, will he be that effective? Because to me, when you look at kind of adding it up, and if he plays a modest amount more, 8 to 10 years, like, it's basically everybody is going to be passed up by him if he continues his productivity, other than Brady. And even Brady, and Brady, of course, we talked about on the last show, longevity. Okay, but that's something that we have to do that for players who are kind of still playing, but also kind of in the conversation. We do have to make a projection, don't we?
Well, no, he asked where is he at right now.
Yeah.
So today, right now, I would say he's in my top 10. I think
if he
will
retired
ultimately
today,
end up being. Yeah, I think he ultimately will end up being the second best quarterback. But for me, you start talking about the guys you named. I did some homework here too. Drew Brees stopped playing at 41. Peyton Manning stopped playing at 39. Phillip Rivers 39. Dan Marino 38. Ben Roethlisberger 39. These guys, Pat Mahomes is going to be 28 this year. So we're talking about 10 more good years of what he is doing in his prime. If he's even throwing for like 4,800 yards, he's still going to land around 70,000 yards, 500 touchdowns. Great numbers. But again, like, Peyton Manning had a neck injury. Ben Roethlisberger fell off a cliff at 36. Things happen.
He ran into a car with his bike too.
Yes, that's a problem. Listen, a couple of things come to mind as you guys talk about those things. And, if we were to just say, okay, let's say he plays 10 more years and he plays at this exact same level, maybe even goes up a little bit here for a couple of years, and then we start to see the decline, but it averages out to what he's done over the first 5 years. 10 more years at this production would put him at 72,000 yards passing, far behind the 89,000 that Tom Brady has. It would put him at, though, touchdown-wise, it would put him at 576 touchdowns, right? Which the record on touchdowns is 649 by Brady, but he would be second. So which is, I'm backing up incredible shrinking man, Eric. If you're catching us via the live stream, Eric almost going clear out of the shot. Literally a talking head is what Eric is. But to Eric's point, like, just if he has a normal-ish length of career, it looks like he could get to where he's number 2 and everything, but still staring up at Brady. He's going to have to play quite a while or step it up numbers-wise to get there. But to what you said, Jeff, about the injury, I do fear the injury. Listen, I freak people out when I bring this up. I don't like looking at videos of him deadlifting, right? I don't like looking at videos of him shoulder pressing 100-pound dumbbells. I guarantee you Tom Brady has never, during his playing career, put 100-pound dumbbells and pressed them over his head. Now, one, he probably can't do it. But it's also not, he doesn't do it because it's not what you need to do to be a productive quarterback. So I think what makes Pat great is that he's one of the guys, he's a lift with the lineman quarterback, right? How many times back in the old days, that was the thing. He's a guy that'll lift with the lineman. And the guys love that. It's not, and it is part of getting guys to run through a wall for you and play for you and all those kind of things, but it's not the best thing physically. He also puts his body in harm's way, which again is what makes him great, right? Scrambling around, making plays, standing in the pocket, and letting Orlando Brown not make a block that almost fractures your leg and makes you play an entire playoffs one-legged, which will add to his lore as well. But that kind of thing, Peyton Manning would turtle to a fault. He knew it was more important to live to fight another day than to win this fight right here. And I think Brady did as well. And I don't know that Patrick Mahomes, and this is the, and I'm the guy that's ready to put him on top right now. I think that is, if it's a career achievement award, which I'll get to in a minute, that's the fear, Eric, when you is that his style of play will not lend him, if what is going to lend most people to say he's number one, his style of play doesn't lend itself to being able to accumulate the counting statistics, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the 100% the question. I will say this, though. The Chiefs have done, do you think he's gotten more harmful or less harmful as his career has progressed? Do you think he puts himself in harm's way more or less now than before? Because I
think it's the same.
I'm gonna make a Brady.
I do too. I think it's the same. I know where you're getting at. I think the Chiefs have called better plays. I've
also gotten linemen in here that have that it will protect him. And when they had somebody in here who was just simply average and got him hurt in the first place, they replaced him, right? So I think that the Chiefs are not. They're turning over every stone here. I mean, Mahomes' average depth of target in 2022 was 7.5 yards. That was 2 yards lower than when he started in 2018. When you look at his time to throw, it is about the same. So he is doing that. He is scrambling more. So to your point, just 32 scrambles in 2018, 55 last year, 61 in 2021. So yeah, he's becoming Brady in that he's willing to dump the ball off and live to fight another day in a lot of cases, but he's still not Brady in that he does take hit. I mean, you think about the Titans game, he basically willed that team into the end zone to tie the game with his legs, and that's always going to be a part of who he is, I think.
Well, and you look at the quarterbacks who play the way he plays. I mentioned Roethlisberger. I look at Brett Favre. I look at John Elway. Look at where they were as players at 36, 37, 38. They were not the same players. They were not at the same high. They were still winners. They still won games, but they were not putting up the kind of numbers we're talking about, having to reach or surpass a Tom Brady. He's been hurt. He's had a significant injury 3 of the last 4 years. He had the ankle last year. He had the turf toe in 2020. He had the knee in 2019. And so that, especially we talk about Josh Allen and some of these guys, Jalen Hurts, how are they going to be taking those kind of lumps? He takes hits too. He gets banged up too.
Yeah, and throw in another ankle injury in 19 as well. The knee is what we remember. The knee, as we've all talked about before, is kind of what got his ankle healthy. He was limping around on the ankle, and the knee forced him to sit out, and that allowed the ankle to heal as well. No, he has taken, he doesn't take guys on like he did as his rookie year in the preseason. Remember, I think it was the Falcons where he put his head down and tried to run through somebody at the goal line. And they're like, whoa. Enough of this, man. No, not the way to go. He doesn't do that kind of stuff, but his toughness, his unwillingness to quit on a play is fantastic. And it's why you have, the shot put to Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the back of the end zone, and the underhand flip to Jet, on the sidelines, the left-handed throw with Von Miller coming down. All those never say die plays don't get made if he goes Peyton Manning, which is harm's coming, throw it in the ground. We're done. But that'll save him in the long run if he would start doing those plays.
Yeah, but he's also very aggressive as a runner in the red zone, which is when you get tagged, because that's when sliding goes out the window. That's when he's going to go for the end zone. That's when players are going to get opportunities for bigger shots on him. I do believe over time he will get better at it, but I just feel like it's hard to see him catch. I don't see him physically being able to do it as long as Brady did it, or even where Aaron Rodgers is now. But I don't know if the motivation is going to be the same, because what Tom Brady did was all about, I was a 6th-round pick. Nobody believed in me. I got to show the world how great I am. Aaron Rodgers sat for the first 3 years of his career. The guys who play late, Drew Brees had a rough start to his career. The guys who play that long generally are guys who are trying to prove something to people, not guys who were going to or guys who were chasing something like Brett Favre was at the end. I think the records We're going to be so far away that chasing them won't matter. And he'll probably have enough rings where he'll be like, you know what? I'm good. I'm good at 37, 38 hanging it up.
I think that's an interesting point, Eric, because
But doesn't that, Jeff?
But isn't that's what I'm getting at? Like, isn't the guy who goes 1, 2, 3, 4 when Lamar Jackson gets voted the number one guy, counts to 10 when he plays Mitchell Trubisky the first time because he went 10th in the draft? I mean, isn't he clapping back at Jamar Chase, Pat who with the 2 rings? Because he does, there's a bit of a Jordan self-created chip, and all it takes is a little bitty something, and he makes it a big thing. And
I think Joe Burrow has more of that in him than Patrick Mahomes does. I think Patrick Mahomes is super motivated. What?
As a guy who went 1-1?
Yeah, but Joe Burrow had to leave Ohio State to go play at LSU. Like, he didn't have the same kind of love in college that Patrick Mahomes had, coming in. And so I think Mahomes is more of I think he enjoys being Patrick Mahomes. I think he's got other interests outside of football. Tom Brady was maniacal. Patrick Mahomes is a full-fledged human being. He's had kids before Brady. He's got married before Brady. He's doing commercials and documentaries before Brady ever thought about doing this kind of stuff. We forget this now, but Tom Brady wasn't even doing commercials until he was, 10 years into the league?
Yeah. He wasn't that good until he was like 10 years in the – well, not – he wasn't.
But that's my point. That's my point. At some point, you can't maintain that. At some point, the things you're doing away from it become bigger as you get older. And it's not just about, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's more about –
I hear what you're saying, but you said maniacal, and that's, Eric, the exact word that Blaine Gabbert used to describe both Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. He said they are both maniacal competitors.
Yeah, I think that the thorn in Jeff's argument is if Mahomes is willing to hang him up at 37, he's probably won enough rings to put him in the conversation with Brady. Right? Like
I think he'll be beaten up by that point. That's what I'm saying. I think to carry forward, he's going to have to be in pristine health. Yeah. And then that motivation is going to be part of it too.
Yeah. Maybe. I think that's a perfect storm, right? Like if you're making the anti-Mahomes case, you're saying he not only is not won that many championships over the next 10 years, he also is dismayed so much by it that he's willing to forego the competitive spirit. To me, I think he might retire at 37, but it's going to be because he wins 5 rings. And he's just like, what else is there for me to do? If he gets in that 5-ring conversation, I know it's not 7 rings, but he's going to be so impressive that you're looking at historically, you have some guys with 4 rings like Bradshaw and Montana, and you have Brady who has kind of an unachievable number of rings. And then you got a guy who is physically and production-wise better than all of them. It would be like Peyton Manning had 5 rings. If Peyton Manning had 5 rings, he would be in the conversation with Brady right now. He just doesn't, and he isn't. So that, I think that if Mahomes has that kind of success, then yes, he might hang it up before he eclipses Brady's total numbers. But I think if he does that, then it's going to be more Jordan-esque than it would be, somebody else.
Okay, now there is the thing I want to hit on. You hit on Michael Jordan. By the way, we're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the entire KC area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they make them disappear. Been doing it since 1994. No commissions, in-house crews, free consultations. Every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. The Jordan thing is key to me in this, because I will ask you both. Just play my game here, Eric. Okay? Don't just answer the question when I ask you. I'm going to ask Jeff first. Michael Jordan does not have more points than Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Karl Malone or LeBron James or lots of other guys, but he never passed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He has the same number of rings as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He has less than Bill Russell. Okay? But at some point in your mind, Michael Jordan became the greatest player that ever played. And in your mind, I think still is, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. When did he become that? Because again, the idea of Brady's numbers or Brady's ring total needing to be achieved has not been the case with Michael Jordan. He did not achieve any of those things, yet he is the consensus, and certainly anybody in the older crowd, before LeBron came along, he was the consensus. Nobody even disputed it. He was the guy. When did he become that guy?
Oh, the greatest of all time?
Yes.
I think when he got 6.
It wasn't until why 6? That's not more than Kareem.
Well, you have to look at how he won them.
Russell.
He won 3 in a row and then quit playing and then came back and won 3 in a row again.
Yep.
And so every year he was playing in the 90s, he won a championship. Like, that's what separated him.
Well, he came back and finished a year and didn't win a championship, just to be clear, so somebody doesn't.
Yeah, every full season.
And then he played every game for the next 3 years, started every game over the next 3 years, which is absurd. My answer to the question, not that anybody asked, is
no, I am asking you because that's what I want to know. Because first of all,
he won the fourth one.
Wait a minute, do you agree Jordan was the best?
Yeah.
Or at least he was before. If you moved on to LeBron, he was.
If you want to say LeBron, that's your own thing. I'm going to say Jordan.
Okay, fine. So when did he get there?
When he won the fourth one.
Well, okay, why?
I mean, he won 3, retired, went and played professional baseball, came back, wore some dumbass number, and then was like, all right, and then didn't win, got back in shape, and then won another ring. And when they won that one in whatever year that was, like 95, you were like, this team's winning 2 more. Like it was inevitable. Like we don't even, and maybe it was just because I was young at the time. I was like 10 years old. But like, it's weird because the inevitability of it was the reason he was the best. And even with Mahomes, he still has to get that inevitability with it. Like we're showing, it was like when the Cowboys, came in 1993 when they got Emmett back. They're like, oh, that team's winning the Super Bowl. And like, it was just so much more predictable back then that's one of the things in like the parody NFL now that like is a little, whereas the Patriots became kind of inevitable in a weird way. Once Mahomes becomes inevitable like that, then he's in the conversation. Because like I was watching a Bulls game. I remember I was 10 years old, and I remember the Bulls, it was like their 72-10 year. And they got behind by like 20 in the second quarter. And they just like put up a full court press and were tied by halftime. And I'm like, oh, that's how real teams, that's how, growing up the Wolves were, played in Minneapolis. And they were terrible. And you're like, oh, that's how a real basketball team works. Like Mahomes is the same thing. Oh, they're down by 10 in the first quarter and it's tied by halftime. Like that's the same thing with Brady. Like that inevitability, and like once it becomes like fully there for Mahomes, it's going to be the Jordan-esque.
Well, and they've played twice. Those two guys have played twice in the playoffs with major stakes on the line. Twice Tom Brady has won. And that history remembers that too.
Sure.
History remembers that you don't get any more opportunities at a bite at that kind of apple.
Yeah.
And so that will always be the dividing line between the two in my mind.
And I think for many people that will be it when they're close. As long as they're close, the Brady side is like, well, Brady was undefeated against him in a conference championship and Super Bowl setting. He was 2-0, right? That I agree. That is going to be the biggest one. And we talked about that going into that Super Bowl with the Bucs, that was what was at stake. This was probably Mahomes' last chance to knock him off and have a head-to-head and have that end 1-1. And I agree. You hit on something I was going to get to and ask. That is going to be a really difficult one for people, for him to get over. And when I make the Jordan comparison, there isn't, to a degree, maybe there was some Celtics early in his career. He didn't actually beat them. They just got old, but not really. The fact that it's like if Larry Bird had still beat Michael Jordan, when he was 40, that like we'd be talking about Larry Bird in that term, but we weren't. But the reason I brought up the Jordan thing is just the idea of it isn't just an accumulation of stats. And I love what you said, Eric, about when it becomes inevitable. The one thing I would question is, when was the championship ever inevitable with Tom Brady?
I think the early years, I think the first 3 years, the Patriots, like it was when they lost to Denver, that was why it was so shocking, right? You were just like, oh, I know they kind of messed around the regular season. Oh, I know that they were like that 05 Patriots team was kind of trash, but like they get in the playoffs against Jake Plummer and the Broncos, and you're like, oh, they got this, and when they lost, you're like, this is weird, right? Brady won every playoff game for the first 4 years of his career. And then they lost, and the same thing, like it got like less inevitable kind of in that 10-year stretch where they didn't win a Super Bowl. They lost to the Colts after having an 18-point lead, all that kind of stuff. It became fairly inevitable that they were going to be in the conference title game. like in the second string.
But that's my point. You're backtracking off. And first of all, you said he won every playoff game. Yeah, and one year they didn't even make the playoffs.
Right.
They were 9-7. I know, but I mean, it does all get, because he's become the guy. All these things, I think you rewrite history to be that we always knew this is it. And I don't think that was the case. And to your point, his undefeated team lost to a 9-7 Giants team. Like, I'm with you on Jordan, but that's an NBA thing. I don't think it was ever inevitable, really, with the Patriots.
Okay, but even then,
I think
even then we had like Scott Kaxmar's like whole thing about like, well, if Mahomes doesn't win now, is he one of the most disappointing athletes to ever grace the? And we, of course, that was absurd. But the fact that people were even like musing about playoff, like them getting to the finish line and not being able to actually complete the race, like there was never that about the Patriots early on, because it was so surprising and so like, you know, there was never like, oh, this is a legacy defining game for Brady early. And then yes, it started to come later after they went 10 years without winning one. I think there is a small gap in the inevitability between the early Patriots and the early Chiefs, even though Mahomes early in his career was much, much better than Brady was early in his career.
Well, and I think that's the point. And by who was the guy Jeff was asking you?
Yeah, who's Scott Kaxmar? Eric always tells these random people that he reads out there who make these inane statements that just piss him off. Like, who is this guy you're talking about?
Well, Petro had him on the radio show.
There was a guy. Did I have him on?
Yeah, you had him on. There was a guy from Football Outsiders, Scott Kaxmar, who basically went through this whole thing and said if Mahomes would have lost to the Bengals, and he was an idiot because he said it was likely they were going to lose to the Bengals, which there was no evidence that was true. And so he's like 40% conference title game win percentage at home, 1 Super Bowl out of 5. Like, he went through all this and said this would be a monumental disappointment. And like, obviously that's absurd, because getting to the conference title game is
he was just asking. There was a guy, and he was trying to say that, like,
he was on your show.
If he didn't get by the Bengals this time, then that would render his first championship as it was just lucky, because look, he keeps coming up short, which is part of what Patrick Mahomes has to do. And I love the point that Eric made, Jeff. I want your thoughts on this, because Eric said, well, Brady didn't have this kind of hype. Exactly. That's that kind of speaks to what you were saying, Jeff, about, you know, kind of coming on late and always needing to prove himself, and why he's hanging around late and playing all those years. But aren't we in and of itself saying Brady's not as good when you say that Brady didn't have to face these expectations? We didn't ask, is he the best of all time? In fact, he wasn't even the best quarterback playing at that time. Even with 3 rings, the consensus was that Peyton Manning was better, especially when Peyton Manning finally beat him, came back from 18 down and won. Everybody was saying Peyton Manning was better. He had way better stats, way better numbers. I mean, I'm not saying people were right, but the court of public opinion did not settle on Tom Brady till about his, 4th or 5th? Because I was going to ask you the same thing about Jordan. Like, when did you arrive at Brady? Because most people were not on Brady because he didn't have the numbers. Mahomes has the numbers and the Brady championships, right? The numbers didn't come till later for Brady. He's already got those numbers. Doesn't that in some way speak to the fact that we're already viewing Mahomes, even if you don't get to him as being number 1 right now, you're already viewing him as better than you certainly viewed Brady at the same point in his career?
Oh yeah, he's a much better quarterback physically. He's a much better quarterback in terms of the things he can do that are spectacular, highlights and all this stuff. But I mean, the problem we had, one, is like 20 years ago, we didn't have these kind of conversations. We weren't trying to figure out how great a guy is going to be at the same time he was playing.
Sure,
let guys play.
You don't remember doing Brady Manning talk all the time?
I don't remember talking about who's gonna be the greatest quarterback of all time amongst them. I remember saying who's the best between the two, but I can't remember the last quarterback. I've covered the league since '95 that we sat here and said, "Man, this guy is going to be the greatest player ever." Like, we didn't do it with maybe Andrew Luck got a little bit of that, when he started off, but it was very, very, very small.
Right.
And so I think part of this process, it's not just us doing it, everybody does it and gets frustrated by it, but I just think it's impossible to determine how great somebody's going to be until they played long enough to have a body of work that puts them amongst the greatest. And so I hear what you're saying about Jordan, but even Brady, I didn't think Brady was the greatest quarterback until he beat the Chiefs that year.
Well,
with New England.
That's a great point. I love that point you made there. There are only two guys that I can think of, right? Like Wayne Gretzky was the greatest hockey player, and I think still is the greatest hockey player that ever played. He overwhelmed with statistics, and he won championships at a rate higher than anybody else had won. Yeah. That was a pretty easy one. The only two guys that fit in that mold, and I'm with you, we weren't talking about the best. The Michael Jordan and LeBron James were two guys. Immediately when LeBron got near him, when he won a championship, and maybe even we were late to the party on LeBron because so many people didn't like that he was the first guy to pick up and leave and go down to Miami and build his own team around him, which almost to me, not to get sidetracked on the NBA, speaks to his greatness that he could do that. But whatever, those guys, Jordan and LeBron, are the guys that early in their career, long before they were done, people were saying, I think this is the best ever, or they are the best ever. Manning and Brady did take it to a new level beyond Elway. Like some people like Unitas, some people like Montana, people like me would make a case for John Elway that had Elway played for the Niners, they would have won 6 or 7 championships. That's what I used to say. Montana for the Broncos, I don't know that they win any because I thought Elway was by far the more gifted quarterback of the two and that he didn't have as good a setup around him. Those were conversations I had back then. But then Manning and Brady ended it all. It was either Manning or Brady. At some point, it was those two. Maybe Joe Burrow's going to get into that, and we're going to get a Burrow. You know, Jamar Chase is going to be right. Burrow's going to win 3, and Manning and Brady or Mahomes is going to win several. But at some point, it was either Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, but I think that was when they were at the end of their career. So for me, yeah, you knew those guys were going to be top 5 quarterbacks, and I think up until the point that Brady won his 6th. Joe Montana was still very much a part of that conversation, right? I mean, there was a lot of people who felt like, but part of the problem with the whole conversation, the debate is that quarterback is such an aesthetics type thing, you know? So it's like, there are people who love Joe Namath. You look at his stats and you're like, how in the hell could Joe Namath be a great quarterback based on what he did in the NFL? There are people who love Bob Greasy as a Hall of Fame quarterback. And you're like, this guy never threw for more than 2,000 yards more than twice in his career. You know, Terry Bradshaw had horrible stats. John Elway was like a 57% passer. I mean, it's all these guys we look at, and ultimately there is no hard and fast framework to define what makes them great. And ultimately it ends up coming back to championships. That's the only thing you can use that spans all eras for all quarterbacks. How many did they win? And the more you win, the higher you get placed on the pedestal. So that, to me, is what Mahomes has got to face here. Everything else he's going to do amazing things. He's done amazing things. But if he finishes with 5 championships, no matter what else he's done, Tom Brady's still going to be the best quarterback who ever played.
I can't go there. I can't say before Mahomes' career is over that we land. If you can't give it to Mahomes now, you can't not give it. You can't take him out of the equation for the end.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm saying if you're right now saying he hasn't done enough, you can't go to the point. You can't take what he's doing now and project ahead and say he's the best. Well, then you can't say that he won't be the best because you don't.
I'm saying he won't be
10 in a row. I mean,
I'm saying if he doesn't win that many if he doesn't surpass Brady in championships, in my book, he can't be number 1. So if he plays 10 more years, what's that?
Jordan is second fiddle to Bill Russell.
I'm not saying that. Basketball is a different sport. Because if you want to go there, Bill Russell was playing at the time when you had 12 teams in the league.
You can't have a universal bar there, right? Because I feel like Jeff is making a reasonable point to like Brady was the reason the Patriots won for as long as they did. Now, was he better than Mahomes the whole time? No. And we had this discussion, you know, on a previous show or one of the other shows we taped, which was like Randy Moss or Jerry Rice. Jerry Rice accomplished a lot more than Randy Moss. I would say if Randy Moss had some of the other traits that Jerry Rice had, he'd be the best receiver of all time. But it's like Moss is more talented. Jerry Rice had the better career. Like, I think right now you can make like Mahomes is the best quarterback to ever play, like talent-wise. Now, if we're judging careers, though, we do have to Brady's career is substantial. And I think it's not just that he won all those championships. It was also that he put up like fantastic numbers in the second half of his career. Like, so it's, I think having that be the tiebreaker is fine in Jeff's case.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I don't think it can just be whoever wins the most championships wins it. It is still a team game. I do think it's fair to say, especially since we're in an era where Montana won 4, Bradshaw won 4,
Mhm.
Brady won 7. Like, I think it's Dan Marino cannot be in the discussion, right? I
He's
think your
not.
quarterback does have to
No.
win championships. They affect things so
Marino has to
much.
be in everybody's top 10. He can't be in anybody's first.
Or even top 5.
I would object to even putting him in the top 5. I do think the winning is really important. I object maybe even to the top 10. I'd have to sit and grind through that a little bit more, but I do think you have to win a championship as a quarterback. But I think to make it just about the quantity of championships, I don't think it's fair because like if I did the same thing, if Patrick Mahomes played for the Patriots and Tom Brady played for the Chiefs, would the championship totals be the same? Because the defenses that Tom Brady won with were top 5 every year. And Patrick Mahomes has played in 3 Super Bowls. And I think last year's defense was the best ranked one he's played. It was number 11, right? Like
But yeah.
the team, like the other half of the game where the quarterbacks aren't on the field does matter as far as winning the championships. You can't just erase that. And Mahomes has carried a lesser team. Can we agree with that across the finish line and all of his championships?
I don't know. I think that that last Patriots team wasn't that amazing compared to what they've had in the past. Like that was not a not a superbly talented team. But the point you're making, I understand the point you're making, but you can make the same point in Mahomes, on the Mahomes end of it, where he's playing in an era where defense is not nearly what it was. Tom Brady played at a time when it started his career when you had 2 of the most dominant defenses in NFL history playing, with the Ravens in 2000 and the Bucks in 2002. And so that to me, it speaks to the era you're playing, which again I go back to. All you can really judge these guys off is how many championships they win. And to me, Brady's championship, it's not just the sheer quantity of it, and Eric can speak to this, it's how he went about it. The first 3 came at a time when he was nowhere nearly considered anything but a game manager, but still found a way to make plays in big games. The last 3 came at a time when he was 36, when he started that run, and wound up having the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history, beating a guy who's going to be one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, in the AFC Championship game, in Mahomes. And then what was the other one? It was Seattle, beating a team that was going for its second consecutive championship with one of the greatest defenses ever as well. I mean,
And the one he
took
lost,
all comers.
the loss to the Eagles, he had like 500 yards passing in that game. and so
then went to the Bucks and took a team that hadn't won anything in 20 years and did it.
Yeah, the Bucks had never won. I mean, he has all the Bucks postseason passing records.
So by the way, I do want to point out, you are right. The last Patriot team, their defense 7th in points allowed, 21st in yards. But the next year, his last year in New England, 1st in points, 1st in yards allowed. It was the best defense in football, and he lost in the wild card round that year. So
what was the offense?
The offense, the year he won it, they were number 4 in points, 5 in yards. Then in 19, his final year where they lost the wild card, they were 7th in points, 15th in yards.
Yeah.
So, the offense was top 5 the year he won it. The defense was, the core of it would be the number 1 defense across the board. But it valid points. Let's finish with this. What does he have to do, Eric, to be the GOAT, for you to say he's best?
I think if he gets to 4 championships, like wins 4 Super Bowls, let's say 4 MVPs, kind of finishes, Drew Brees-ish in all the records. Like, I think if he's firmly beneath, if the only player with better statistics and better championships than him is Tom Brady, then I'll be willing, then he would have had a good enough career, in my opinion, to be the best quarterback of all time. The outlier with Brady, all the stuff that Jeff has said is true. All that, and I agree that if you want to hold out and say the best quarterback of all time is going to have to win 8 championships, then that's fine. To me, that's a perfectly acceptable worldview. I personally think that if he gets 4 MVPs, 4 championships, and is kind of second in all the passing stuff behind Brady, then he will have become the best quarterback of all time by doing that.
4 championships, 4 MVPs. He would have surpassed Tom Brady's MVP total. He won 3 in his career. Jeff, what would it take for you to say Patrick Mahomes is top dog?
Got to match him in championships. I think he'd have to get for the championships to matter less. I think he's going to have like 6 or 7 MVPs. Aaron Rodgers has got 4 MVPs right now, so he'd have to be that dominant of a player. The problem he's going to have, and people are going to read this as I'm like dumping on Mahomes. I love Patrick Mahomes. He's a phenomenal player, but the problem he's going to have is that there's a lot of great quarterbacks in the NFL who are around the same age as him, who are going to be doing great things too. And Joe Burrow is the top of that list for me as somebody who's going to be a problem for him and this team. Josh Allen obviously has the skills to do it. Trevor Lawrence has shown some flashes of things. There's a lot, and there's going to be other guys coming through the draft. 2 biggest questions for Mahomes: what happens when this current core is done, especially Travis Kelce, and what happens when Andy Reid's done? Because Andy Reid's not going to coach him for the next 10 years. I guarantee you that much. And so that was a big part of Tom Brady's success, having Bill Belichick for those 20 years in New England. When that changes, and none of us can foresee how that's going to look. So for me, he's got to do 7 titles.
Wow, that's an interesting point. All right, what kind of numbers when it's all said and done? Eric, you're the math guy. What do you look? I tripled the numbers and laid it out there. Is that where you think it'll be? Is that a pretty good rule of thumb? Does he go beyond it, dude? Do we think he could play till 40 years old?
Yeah, we don't know how the league is going. I mean, the league always tends to more games, tends to more, stats. So he very well could eclipse this. I would say 80,000 passing yards and 600 touchdowns are within his reach. So when I come up for air 10 years from now and we're talking about the best quarterback to ever play, I think we're talking about 80,000 yards. I think we're talking about 600 passing touchdowns, 4 Super Bowl trophies, 4 league MVPs. Like that's who I think Mahomes ends up retiring as.
By the way, 89,000 yards for Tom Brady is the mark to shoot for. Drew Brees is at 80,000, 80,358. So Eric's putting him right there at number 2 on that list. And for touchdowns, if he got to 600, Tom Brady's 649 would be.
So Eric, you got him playing until he's 40 or more.
38 to, I mean, you're baking in some increase, right, in efficiency, and you are getting an 18th game at some point, right? I mean, like that's.
Yeah, that's an important thing.
If he's playing 38, he's throwing for $5,000 every year for the next 10 years.
Yeah, I mean
he's at 24,000 right now.
Yeah, so 38 to 40, right? So 40.
Yeah, I mean, right now as a starter, if you let's see, knock out to it. Basically, he's 5,000 yards in 5 years.
But again, we have increases to the game, to the environment of the game and stuff like that.
4,800. He's averaged about 4,800 yards a year.
Yeah, and some of those are 16 games, some of those are 17 games.
Well,
he missed a couple of games in there.
Yeah,
right?
He's played 16, 14, 15, 17, and 17. So, yeah, that's he'll probably miss some games here and there, and the seasonal totals rounding have been 5,100, 4,000, 4,700, 4,800, and 5,300. So, it does depend on where it goes. 5,250 last year. I mean, and again, so if he plays anywhere near the quantity of years that Tom Brady did, the numbers are going to they're going to go to him because he's
but that's Brady playing that long is again that's so, and that's why he did it. I mean, that he did that.
Yes,
it meant so much to him because he wanted to put it into a place where nobody could touch him. I don't know if he would ever say that out loud, but knowing the guy, knowing people who've known him, knowing people who've coached him, that's what it was. Scorched earth for him for his career. And again, Mahomes is incredibly competitive, amazing winner, all the things you want from a quarterback. He is that. But Tom Brady had a chip on his shoulder for 23 years, and it was all about even before getting drafted. It was back what happened with Michigan. It was just the events, the dynamics, the factors that played into his career just aren't there for Mahomes. So that's why I think he's going to be around 70,000 yards. The math you put out there, 4,800 yards, an average year for him for the next 10 years, probably 37, 38 touchdowns. He's going to land probably around 75,000 yards, I would say. Probably 550, 560 TDs. Probably win the MVP 3 more times. I'll give him 5 MVPs just because he's that great. But and I think he will firmly be the second best quarterback to ever have played. Which, by the way, is not a bad thing to be. Knowing this franchise's history, I think they would take that all day long to say he was the second best quarterback in the history of football.
Yeah. Yeah, there is nothing wrong with being number 2 out of everyone who's played the position. That is not an insult. If that's where you put somebody on that list, I would agree with that. Don't forget, we're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They're hiring right now. If you're looking to join one of the best teams in Kansas City, Gann Asphalt and Concrete is hiring all positions: project manager, drivers, operators, crew members, starting pay up to $30 per hour. Based upon your experience, insurance, paid time off. Those are just some of the benefits you can get. Check out more at GannAsphalt.com. And of course, if your business has problems with that parking lot, remember every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lots. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, my name is Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining